Sticking with political expression, former Home Secretary Suella Braverman has said a new law should be introduced to allow ministers to ban protests. So she's been writing in the Telegraph, setting out her plan to tackle what she describes as mass extremism on our streets. And that includes giving Home Secretaries the power to step in and stop protests, as well as outlawing any expression of support for terrorism and making it easier to prosecute people for anti-Semitic chanting. So her proposals do go quite a bit further than those expected to be announced tomorrow by her successor, James Cleverly, the new Home Secretary. These will include plans to jail protesters who climb on war memorials, as well as banning masks and fireworks at demonstrations. Well, I actually wrote a piece for the Telegraph, like Suella, a few weeks ago, saying that I think that masks should be banned at protests. So I'm really glad that the government is thinking of doing that. I think that this habit of mask wearing, which has escalated massively since COVID, no surprise there, since we were all literally forced to wear them, has become a really insidious thing. If you talk to police, you look at the evidence that they put forward, they are finding it increasingly hard, naturally, to identify culprits and criminals because people's faces are covered. And I don't know why anyone would turn up at a public protest and cover their face for any innocent reason. It's a public protest. You're there to make your views known, your voice heard. So why would you cover your face unless you're hiding from something?
Well, can I just say then that last year I was walking somewhere and I ended up on the fringes of a protest against what was happening in Iran with how they were cracking down on women, revealing their hair and everything else. And there were lots of people who I suspect of being from Iran, as in the Iran secret police or whatever else, who were noting down people who were there, who were taking photographs and noting things down. And there were some people who were wearing masks or wearing scarves or trying to hide their faces. And I did actually think that perhaps if you had family back in Iran and there you were protesting about what was going on, perhaps there was a reason for it.
So that is an interesting counter-argument. It's a very specialised, it's just a very
No, I know, but I'm
just
pointing
your
out
point
that
is
there are
really
sometimes
valid, which is the biggest barrier to communication is not seeing someone's face.
Yeah.
And if you go to a march like that covering your face, there's a reason for it, isn't it? Because you don't want to be detected. Now, then the question comes, what do you do with people who wear the niqab, who wear the burqa, for example? Do we go down
Which has been banned in France. And in
2010 it was banned in France. Do we go down that line and say, actually, if we want a cohesive society, which is what Braverman is saying, if we abide by British values, if we want a united country, then don't we go down the same lines that France?
Personally, I would do. And I know it's really controversial, but sorry, I just don't want to see that on our streets. I think it's not part of our culture. I think we're in an open society and faces are important.
Well, but this is the thing. In France, if you're entering a public building, you have to, your face cannot be covered. And that doesn't just include sort of religious coverings. It also includes like bike helmets and all of those things as well. So I don't think it's a matter of, targeting religious minorities. At the end of the day, if you live in British society, you have to concede for the good of the majority. You have to concede certain things. And I do think being able to unveil your face is one of them. You should be able to show your face because London is the most surveilled city in the world. If the police can't identify you, then you can really get away with any crime. So I do think that's a very valid point. But I find it a bit hypocritical for Suella Braverman in her statement with the Telegraph because she's had members of her own party resign over this sort of Israel-Gaza issue. I think for her to paint this kind of one-sided picture of everyone that goes to these marches that I don't agree with their opinion are hateful, I don't think that's actually a very clever or politically insightful way to address this. Baroness Varsi in 2014 resigned from Cameron's cabinet because she disagreed with the government's inconsistency with regard to Israel and Gaza. And I think you're seeing that now here with more moderate voices, not people shouting jihad or hateful things on the streets of London, which we obviously all condemn. But really, there's a lot more nuance here. And that's something Suella Braverman has never understood. She has no political instinct whatsoever.
I think my problem with this piece is that I agree with some of the things she's saying, but then I completely disagree with some of the things. So, yes, we should ban masks. balaclavas, whatever. Not just on marches, in daily life.
What about niqab?
Yeah, what about
all of
niqabs
it,
and burqas?
yeah.
I think niqabs and burqas shouldn't be worn in public places in this country. If you go into a shopping mall or into a bank, I don't think they should be.
So if we polled the public, what do you think the public would come out with?
Yeah,
I think it'd be pretty much 40-60 in favour of no face covering.
I think it would be 7.
40,
I think it would
60.
be like 80.
I think it will be much higher.
Much higher.
Well, sorry, for banning.
No, for banning it would be much higher.
Much higher.
But stuff like the anti-Semitic chanting on these marches, I went on 3 or 4 pro-Palestine marches, and there was certainly anti-Semitic chanting, there was certainly anti-Semitic signs being held up, and that stopped me from going on any more because I didn't like that there was. For me, there was too much of it. I went on a pro-Israel march, and there was no one in masks, there's no one with balaclavas on, there was no anti-Islamic chanting, and actually the rabbi who did a big speech at the end of the march actually did a plea and said, "I do not want there to be Islamophobia. Islamophobia is as bad as anti-Semitism." That kind of peaceful rhetoric I didn't hear on the pro-Palestine
It's interesting
marches.
that this is nothing new, though, because I was just looking, one randomly kind of finds these things, and there was a liberal conservative in 1852 who said the first duty of society is the preservation of society, and actually said Parliament's liberty, leading articles and essays are all good, but they're secondary, which I thought was actually quite interesting, because essentially saying, we need society more than
together.
anything, more than anything else, and that was 1852. So
More history lessons from Penny.
Yes, very good, Penny. But I do think we've reached a tipping point. The question is, when does that tipping point occur?